Hey, welcome, day 16. Can you believe it? We were just talking about that.
Morning.
Day 16 of Breakfast in Biology. Welcome, everybody. We're happy that you're here. We're happy to see you. We missed you over the weekend. So what do we need to do? We need to give a little bit of some shout outs here, some welcomes. Roll call.
All right. Michael Jackson was first in the house today, followed by Sky Dragon. We've got Jake in here, Darius in here, Zuli in here, Eli, Dominic, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, big boy. Who else is in there? We're trying to scroll through all of that. Alexia's in there. Esteban, Finley, Jose, Barack Obama, Abby, Emily, Diana, Aiden, Audrey, Connor, Maya, Haley, Alexis, Gabe. Sorry if I missed anybody. Gladys, Emma, Leah, Cameron, Cohen, Alexi.
Yeah, keep coming. Jeffrey Joe.
Annie. Supreme Ginger 77.
It's so nice that we've been seeing some of these names every day for 16 days, and it's so nice that we're seeing some new names. We really appreciate that, guys and gals. In keeping with tradition, I think the best place to start today would be with our special guest. So for today, we've been telling you that your teachers miss you, and your teachers have been popping in. We had a student pop in on Friday. If you missed that, your students are missing you. Today, we're going all the way to the top because not only do your teachers miss you, but your administrators miss you too. Welcome, Mr. Abels.
Thank you, Mr. Suter. I appreciate that. Hello, students. Good morning. First and foremost, I want to thank all of you for being here. It's really amazing to have this many students participating. Understand that we miss you, we care about you, and we will get through this. I also want to thank Mr. Suter and Mrs. Smith. This is absolutely amazing that they do this for you every day. I'm so proud of them. They're doing such an amazing job, and you're truly blessed to have these two as your teachers. So I won't take up that much of your time, but good morning again. Great seeing all of your faces. We miss you. We will get through this, and we will be stronger as a result of it. Back to Mr. Suter and Mrs. Smith. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Abels. Everything's going all right on your end?
Everything is wonderful. Although I'm learning I'm a pretty bad elementary school teacher because I don't think my kids are getting the education they deserve when I'm here.
Nice. I have a feeling you'll be making some phone calls today.
Absolutely. I have a list actually of 25 students that I'm going to be calling their parents today. And that's why the students that are on here, it's important that you're on here unless you want a phone call from me.
Right. Dominic said, "What's up, best friend?"
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, it's amazing. I'm going to have to give some of these parents calls, but it is great to hear all your voices, kids. We miss you. Like I said, we're all in this together. And I guess I would be remiss to not say it is pretty powerful that we can get Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and Barack Obama all on the same live stream. So Mrs. Smith and Mr. Suter are pretty powerful.
Mr. Bernie Sanders is typically here too.
I was going to say he's busy working.
He's out on the campaign trail.
Thank you all. Take care, everybody. See ya.
See you later. All right. So that takes us into some new ground. We told you today was new stuff. First of all, another shout out to all the students that have the grade book filled, that used last week to catch up. You've done all the way up through the transcription quiz. It's amazing to see people have done that. Some of you still have some work to do, but that's okay.
Grading to do. You know what I mean? Like, please, I'm trying to get caught up.
We're getting it's like I get a couple assignments every hour all day long, right? So we do appreciate that. We want you to keep rolling with that. And so today we're going to start talking about mutations. And to get into this, I thought it would be interesting to kind of jump back a little bit, back to organic molecules, and think about kind of the big picture here. So we've been talking about translation and about putting a bunch of amino acids together. And when we do that, we're building a what? What are we building when we put a whole bunch of monomers, a whole bunch of amino acids together? What organic molecule are we really trying to build here? Waiting for that. What organic molecule are we building when we put a bunch of these amino acids together? All right, now we're transitioning to real questions here.
Time to wake up.
All right, good.
Protein, Alexi, Maya.
Very nice. We're building a protein. Now, I want you to think back to when we talked about proteins. One of those proteins we specifically focused on were enzymes, because enzymes are a protein, and we focused on how they work. And so we said that proteins really, we used like the key and the lock example a lot. I don't know, Mrs. Smith probably used something similar. What happens? Like, how can we make a protein stop working? Like, what do we have to do to it? What's the most important thing about the protein? Most important thing about the protein is its what? Long, awkward pause while we wait. Well, Barack Obama, you're right. If we denature it, it will stop working. So denaturing changes what? What's the most important thing?
I talk to my students a lot about like different keys, different locks. You know, we all have the same car, but we have a thank you, Haley and Eli.
Right. So the shape is super, super important to the protein. So when we talk about mutations, I want you to think about the shape of a protein. And I want to show you an image real quick. Not the image I wanted, but I think it will work. So let me share my screen with you. How do I do that? Boom. Let me see if I can make that image just a little bit bigger. There we go. And so this is really showing us what it would look like if we take a protein and we start kind of unraveling that protein all the way back down to just that polypeptide chain. And so once we get the polypeptide, and this is what it looks like coming out of the ribosome, right? So we're building that protein in the ribosome, we get this chain coming out, then the chain starts to fold up. And so what I wanted you to realize is there's reasons that it folds up, and I couldn't find a good diagram of this, so you're just going to have to listen and think for a second. Different amino acids have different properties. Some might be hydrophilic, love water. Some might be hydrophobic, hate water. Some might be polar, some which would attract to each other polar molecules. Some might be non-polar. Some might be acidic. Some might be basic. So they have these different we don't need to get into all the properties, but they have these different properties. And because of those different properties, some amino acids will attract to other amino acids, and some will want to get away from other amino acids. And because of that, that's what causes our protein to fold up. So in class, we talked about 2 ways to denature a protein. So one more question from me. There's 2 ways to denature a protein that we've talked about. What are those 2 ways to denature a protein to change its shape? Oh man, you really have to think now. You really probably have to think on this one. And here's where we need our Jeopardy music. Dun, 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 dun. Should learn it on the guitar so I could just play it off real quick. 2 ways to denature a protein. 2 things that made enzymes stop working.
I see. Charlie, Eli, Haley, Annie. Nicely done.
Nicely done. So 2 things that will denature a protein are pH and temperature. So if we already have a protein made and that protein's working, through pH and temperature, we can change the protein. We can denature it, change its shape. It doesn't work. What if there was another thing that could denature a protein that wasn't heat or temperature, that happened before we even got the protein made? And so this is what I want you to be thinking about. Like right now, this order of amino acids, why is that important? Because the properties of the amino acids are going to determine how it folds. So if we change the amino acid and we change its property, and Mrs. Smith and I were talking earlier, she related it to hanging out with friends. You want to hang out with friends with the right properties or whatever. If we fold it differently, it will fold differently then. So here's what I want to do with you. Here's an amino acid chart. All right, so we can take 3 amino acids off this chart. So let's take, I'm going to take LEU. So the amino acid LEU, you can't see this, but I'm writing it down. Let's take, and the code we're going to use for that is CUU. And then we're going to take pro right next to it. And we'll use CCU for that one. And let's just do one more, HIS. I'm just going right across, and that's CAU. So I'm going to turn my camera on, and I just got this protein, this amino acid, that code, that amino acid, that code. This is a messenger RNA chart, so I just wrote down the messenger RNA. So if I change my camera real quick, give me a second. Okay. So I'm going to focus in on my camera now. You see what I did? Here was the code. I wrote the code. I guess I could have showed you that. So let's make my camera really big. Here they are. So this was my amino acid, right? That column was my amino acid. This column is my mRNA, my messenger RNA. Notice we left out the tRNA because our chart didn't need it. So we should, from this, really easily be able to figure out what the DNA was. Because C would go to G, U would go to A, U would go to A, G, G, A, G, T, I think that's a U, A. So we have one side of our DNA. And if we wanted to, we could real quick go through, put the other side of the DNA. And so here's our DNA molecule. Now, I want to see if you're following along, if you're really getting it. How could I denature my protein? I could denature the protein simply by changing an amino acid. So I'll take this one in the middle. If I change this amino acid, I'm going to denature the protein. Potentially denature the protein so it will not fold the same way. And do you see how I can do that? Because if this is different, the message we send out to the cell is different, it would change it. And how would we do that? By having this different. All right, stop and think about that a second. Because once that sets in, it's going to make total sense to you. We can change a protein by heating it or changing its pH and denaturing it. We can also change a protein by changing the DNA code. Right? So if we change the DNA code, and I see people over here in the thing saying change the DNA. Great. So what we're talking about is mutation. So Mrs. Smith is going to give you, there's multiple examples of how to do this. We're going to talk about some tomorrow. Today, Mrs. Smith is just going to give you 2 examples of how this could happen. And these are pretty big examples of how this could happen. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
All right. So when we're dealing with changing a protein, you know, you've already said in the side, we have to go all the way back and look at the DNA. So if we look at DNA, and let's say that we happen to have a DNA strand that is AAT, CAT, GGG, and that is part of our DNA strand. So when you were to go down to our mRNA, you would then change that, and we know that rule that A goes to U, T goes to A, C goes to G, and so on and so forth. Oops. And that would go to then our amino acid. But what happens if we take something away? And so as maybe our DNA is replicating, they skip over something. So this first one, if we take something away, so let's say we take this away, and that disappears, we call that a deletion. Now, why would that be bad? I mean, we're just missing one of those. But when our DNA is read and then put into mRNA, when it gets to the ribosome, how does the ribosome read it? What does it look at? So I want you to think about that. What does it look at? It looks in a specific type of group. There's a couple of words you could put in here. But what does it look for? It looks for a set of blank or a blank. Who's got that?
Some people in the chat are asking if there's a delay. There's always a delay. From what we're saying and what you're saying, it's always about a 10 to 15 second delay.
Correct.
That's why we have to pause for so long waiting for you to answer.
Anybody? What is it looking for? And if you pay attention to how I wrote the original,
There's a big
that
hint.
should help you. Groups of blank.
There we go. Triplets, codons. Very nice.
Good. Triplets or codons. Okay. So when you talk about a deletion, why is that so important? Okay. If I write my original up here, so this was originally AATCATGGG, and then we have this one that's missing. What really happens now when we go to our mRNA is it doesn't read it like this. With the deletion, it will actually group these now into threes. And all of a sudden, we will have mRNA that is UUG. You can see where I'm looking at here because this is missing. And then the next one will be UAC. And then the last one would be CC and whatever came next in that DNA. And sorry, I just see that there's a glare now on my screen or from my light. So when we're looking at that, you all of a sudden have completely different amino acids that are going to pair with these triplets or with these codons. So yes, Eli, the triplets would be changed. Okay, so deletion is one way that you can change it. There's something very, very similar. Can anybody think about what that might potentially be? So instead of a deletion, what else could we do that would completely change it?
I'm watching.
Okay. Ooh, purple apparently doesn't erase well.
I'm watching.
Okay, so we had deletion.
Addition.
Good.
Insertion.
Insertion, great. And insertion's actually the word that we use. So you have an insertion or you have a deletion. So with an insertion, what will happen is instead of like, let's say AATCATGGG, we would say AATGCA and TGG with one G. So you've added an extra letter. So again, when we go down to the mRNA and we look at the codons, then the first codon might be the same, but the second codon will be changed. The third codon will be changed, and so on and so forth. So with an insertion, again, all of the amino acids that are associated with that are going to be changed. So I want you to think about this question. If there is an insertion at the very, very beginning of the DNA or the mRNA strand that is going to be used for translation, it's going to change every single amino acid afterwards. Versus one that's maybe all the way down at the end, it might only change one. But it only takes one change in amino acid to potentially change that entire shape. If one goes from being polar to non-polar, then all of a sudden it changes shape. And so when Mr. Shooter was talking about friends, like think about if you have a good set of friends that all like the same type of music as you can hang out together. And then all of a sudden, one of those decides they no longer like the same things you do. All of a sudden, your friend group starts to change and maybe things don't fit the way that they used to. Okay, so someone changed, someone mutated. If someone moves in from a different district and all of a sudden they are coming into your friend group, that can change the entire thing. So I try to think of real world examples to kind of show you what we're talking about with that. So both of these types, both insertion and deletion, these are called frame shift.
Which is a word that makes a lot of sense. You think about it.
Okay, so when we talk about reading something, we're talking about reading something in a certain frame. And so if you shift everything, you're reading in a different frame. Imagine having a book, okay, and we're reading a book or we're reading a sentence and you take all of the spaces out. You might be able to still read what that says if it's all close together, because your brain will start to interpret where words are supposed to be stopped. But if then you take out one letter or you start changing that and there's no spaces, all of a sudden the sentence starts to not make sense. You're shifting your reading frame. Anything else I need to add to that, Mr. Shooter?
No, I think that was an awesome explanation. So we have, and we're doing great because we're at 22 minutes here, and we're trying to keep them to a certain length. So today, we kind of reviewed what a protein is, how they fold, why their shape is important, and then Mrs. Smith got into 2 reasons, other than heat and pH that happen later, 2 reasons that could mess it up right from the beginning. That's the insertion and deletion. And understand, these are big. Frame shifts are bad because, like she said, everything after it, when you're messing up a whole bunch of stuff. All right. So what we have for you, we have one thing we want you to do before tomorrow. So one little takeaway. There's a paper like this in Moodle. It's called Monday's or Today's Takeaway or whatever in Moodle. And all we're going to ask you to do is to take this original piece of DNA, turn it into mRNA here, and then find the 3 amino acids using this chart at the bottom. So filling out this chart. If you're done with translation and transcription, this is going to be a piece of cake. It's going to take you like 2 minutes. Then there's a question. The question says, today in class, we discussed insertion and deletion mutations. Looking at the code and the amino acids above, can you think of another way a mutation could be caused? All right. So is there something else that could happen that could cause a mutation that is not an insertion and is not a deletion? And that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. All right. So really, this homework assignment for tonight, all work is homework now. This homework assignment for tonight should take you about 3 to 4 minutes on top of the 23, 24 that you've spent with us. So, Mrs. Smith, anything to add to that, or are we ready to let these kids go?
No, I mean, this should be pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, just reach out and let us know.
If you're still not done with work from last week and you're having problems sitting at home doing nothing about it, doesn't help you get it done, reach out to us. We'll do Zoom sessions with you. We'll find a way to help you out. Also, keep in mind, Mrs. Moorhead, who else do we have in there?
Mrs. Claybaugh, Mrs. Noble.
Right. All of them are available to help people. And if you want to email them, like if you're like, I don't want to be in a room with Mr. Surter, and you want to ask Mrs. Moorhead or Mrs. Claybaugh or Mrs. Noble, just send them an email too. And they will get online and help you as well. So with that, I think you have anything to add, Mrs. Smith?
Nope.
All right. So we're so happy to see you as always. We miss you. Wash your hands. Stay safe. We love you. We'll see you tomorrow.